Hey Rebels, my name is Matthew Barton. Welcome to the Rebellion Brewing podcast. Some brewers are keen to avoid controversy. Don't rock the boat, don't be political, or just go along to get along. Others loudly and proudly embrace a profane, political, take-no-prisoners approach. Christina Owczarek is definitely in the latter camp, and she joins me today to talk about all things XhAle Brewing. So let's get into it. Christina, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me, Matthew. It was a wonderful intro.
When I took a look at your Facebook and your social media, I was like, oh, this person's going to be a lot of fun to interview.
I'm definitely that rainbow-colored crayon in the mix on all different kinds of levels.
For people who don't yet know about XhAle Brewing, who are you and what do you do?
So female-owned, queer-owned brew company. Our tagline is provocative beer for conscious thinkers and drinkers. So our beer is made to be just as conversation worthy on the inside of the can as it is on the outside of the can. We have a really strong message around social standing and political standing. The first beer we released in October last year, which was the brand launch, was called Impeachable, and we made fun of Trump. So that's kind of where we stand. We talk about, as you said, like in your intros, we don't go along just to get along. As a woman who has mixed in mostly male-dominated spheres my whole entire life, right through from personal relationships through to professional relationships and sporting endeavors, I've always been the person that's not kind of fit in with. What's the saying? One doesn't look like the others. Also late diagnosed ADHD. And I finally found out a few years ago why I've never felt, I kind of fit in anywhere that I've ever been. So I created a brand for all those people, because I know I'm not the only one, and I created a brand for all those people who have a voice that sounds like me and people that look like me, people that feel like me, and kind of the oddballs of people who don't fit into the mainstream demographic.
My next question was going to be what's kind of your vibe, but I think you kind of already touched on it. I guess the next piece for me would be to say it's a really interesting strategy when you're trying to introduce yourself in a very bloated, competitive market. If you are the nail that sticks out, sometimes you get hammered down, but other times people get caught and they're like, oh, I'm going to pay attention to that. So what's the beer that people should check out first from you?
Right now, my See You Next Tuesday, Aussie Kolsch. I named a beer See You Next Tuesday. I had a lot of people warning me that I shouldn't do that, and I've been told, a lot of people have told me over the course of my life I shouldn't do a lot of things. So the See You Next Tuesday, Aussie Kolsch. So one of the things that I do really well with beer is take traditional styles and turn them upside down using New World techniques and New World ingredients. So this takes a Kolsch and uses all Australian hops, so late edition Topaz, dry hopper Galaxy at like 2 grams per litre, and the way in which it presents itself is like this beautiful springtime creamy floral and melon and light pineapple that comes through on it. And partial proceeds actually go back. So part of the core of my brand is community give back and community service. And so all the core beer that will be in XhAle will all have an ongoing community give back on them. And this one actually has partial proceeds go to the Kangaroos Football Club here in Calgary. And I help sponsor they don't turn anybody away, but I help sponsor families who otherwise wouldn't be able to afford sporting opportunities. As I mentioned, I'm super late diagnosed ADHD, but I grew up in a, white working class family on colonial settled land in Melbourne. And I had the opportunity of sport my whole entire life, and I've been an athlete my whole entire life, right through from dancing through to downhill ski racing, horse riding, marathon running, Muay Thai, Jiu-Jitsu, MMA. So one of the things that this beer does is gives the gift of sport to others who might not have the opportunity to do it otherwise. So I want to be able to pass that on.
That's fantastic. I have a small confession to make. Mark had come back and brought me a can of See You Next Tuesday. It was stashed in our fridge at work. And I was like, I'm saving that. I'm going to have it on the pod with Christina. Somebody swiped it and drank it on me. I have no See You Next Tuesday.
What a cunt.
I love the Aussie connection with the phrase and the terminology. What has been the general reaction to See You Next Tuesday? Because that's a very salty kind of, in Canada, it's very close to the N-word.
There's a whole song it's called, if you Google You Can't Say Cunt in Canada, there's a whole song about it. It's wonderful.
You can't say cunt in Canada. Saying cunt's not very nice at all. No, you can't say cunt in Canada. So I asked the Sheilas what they called it. And they said muff, mut, minge, quim, twat, little flower, twinkle, tunnel of love. So if you're going to say cunt in Canada, you got to say it with a velvet glove.
So one of the things that I try and do is take back the power and destigmatize. So one of the things I want to do is destigmatize that, because it's been used in North America to degrade women for a super long period of time. So what about if we just take the power back on it? I have one. It's wonderful. So, if I am not using it as a derogatory term that is meant to degrade me, I feel that there's a certain power in that. Let's destigmatize it. We don't find dick offensive. Why is my female genitalia so offensive?
Your favorite word?
Why is it so? But why is cunt? Why is the word cunt so offensive? And why is dick not offensive?
I don't know. I like words, and I really wish we could take it back and just throw it out there. But also, I'm aware of the privileged position as a white cishet dude. I can't walk around saying the N-word. I can't walk around saying the C word anymore. Those privileges are now not within the remit of my space in the world. I think, at least from my perspective, there are places that we can't go anymore, and people who were not privileged and minorities or queer coded or whatever you want to put them in, who did not necessarily fit or belong, they used to have their noses pressed up against the glass and felt like they weren't fully included, and they carved out those spaces for themselves. And a lot of stale, pale white dudes can be really mad that they don't get to use those words anymore, or mad that they don't get to go in those spaces freely. But I think from my perspective, it's like, I'm going to respect your space, respect the people's colors, spaces, those niches that they've carved out, and recognize that it's not for me, and that's okay, and it doesn't hurt me as a person. So that's kind of why I wanted to say to you, how are people taking See You Next Tuesday?
Yeah, you know what? Here's the other thing. A lot of Canadians want to say it. Like, they want to say it. And the other thing in Australia, we don't have a negative connotation around it, because we can actually say, we use it in like a loving term.
Really?
Like, oh yeah, we don't use it to like hate on somebody all the time. We can say, hey, you know what? Have you met that Matthew Barton? He's a real good cunt. Have you met him? He's awesome. Like, we'll actually use it as an endearing and loving term towards people. And that's the difference, right? We've taken this word that is supposed to be so hateful and poisonous, and change the perspective on it, where it's like we can use it as like something that's cute and fun. And you know what? Cunts are cute and fun. Let's face it. Like when we strip it down to it, as a bisexual woman and someone that has one, they're wonderful. They are cute and fun. You said that this was an adult show, so
I love it. One of the other things I noticed was you had a nude male calendar.
Oh, it's not just male.
Oh, it's not just male. What's going on with that?
No. So last year, in the midst of pandemic, when we couldn't do events, I've been heavily involved in breast cancer awareness and giving back over the course of runs in my family. And then I've also been involved in Movember over the course of the last couple of years as well. But because we couldn't do any events, I was like, okay, so what do we have? What do we have now that we can do? So I started the Balls, Boobs and Beer calendar. This year, the 2022 one is phenomenal. And this is a collaboration project with livefreephotography.ca. So if you go onto Instagram, livefreephotography.ca, Ryan Orr, who is the man behind the lens, is an amazing human and so crazily talented. So I rang him, and I know him through my Muay Thai days. And I said, I got this idea. And he kind of went, oh, shit, Christina's got ideas. And we came up with a concept to do a calendar. So 100% of the proceeds are donated. This year, so 2022, we're working with Each and Every. And I sit on the board of Each and Every. And we're a coalition of businesses now nationally that are advocating around harm reduction in the space to face our opioid crisis right now. And that has a fairly personal lived experience, a reason for it for me. So the calendar is super fun. It is diverse and it is inclusive. And we shoot at different breweries, different beer-centric venues in weird nature places, but it's so beautifully and wonderfully done, and we have a ton of fun doing it. The people who walk, we've had people in tears and crying during and after, just from the liberation and being like, I have hated my body for so long, but you made me feel beautiful and wonderful and accepted. And it's also around that destigmatization. I show my nipples in this because why do my nipples have to be so censored and covered up? Instagram standards, if you show a male nipple, it's fine, but apparently mine is so hypersexualized and offensive. Once again, why is my body so hypersexualized and offensive? So it's around destigmatization, and that's what we do with it Each and Every as well, is we destigmatize drug use. We recognize that everybody uses drugs. The same thing, everybody has nipples, everybody is naked. Like at the end of the day, we're all naked. So the calendar is just something super fun for that, and a place for vulnerability and a place for compassion and fun. It's super fun.
I see a lot of connections between what you're doing and some of the stuff we're doing. That when you say harm reduction, we've been talking a lot this year about naloxone kit training for our staff, about how to help people who maybe just need to get in out of the cold for 15, 20 minutes, have a coffee. They're not there to cause trouble. They just needed 15 minutes to warm up. And what really surprised me was there's a neighboring coffee shop that I popped by, and he goes, I will absolutely slide someone a cup of coffee and a donut at no cost if they come in and they just needed to warm up. He's like, if they are in such a state that they need to ask me for a free cup of coffee, he's like, I will. And I was like, yeah, that's really interesting, because I presumed that this person was really, really uptight and would just be like, get out of my coffee shop, you weirdo. But really, he's kind of embraced what's happening in our community and what's happening in our neighborhoods. So to hear you talking about harm reduction, I think, man, there's so many parallels, so many ways to work together. I'd really love to pick your brain after the podcast to kind of learn from you more about harm reduction as we, as a business, start thinking about it.
Oh, you've made me tear up. Sorry. Oh, wow. That's so wonderful. I think one of the things that, we've criminalized trauma. And we've set up these capitalist colonial structures that exclude the people who need our help the most. I have my own trauma and my own lived experience that I've come out on the other side alive of, because I had the opportunity of infrastructure there to support me. But not everybody has that opportunity of infrastructure, i.e. family, education. I don't come from generational wealth, but I definitely don't come from, huge amounts of generational or cultural trauma, especially cultural trauma. And to see our community and local businesses say, or give somebody a cup of coffee if they just need to warm up, where I've worked in businesses, especially in the downtown core of Calgary, who would just shoo people out. And it broke my heart. It absolutely broke my heart. And there's so many times, I have seen, especially when you go and get a, coffee at Timmy's or whatever else, it's not too much for me to spend an extra $10 and purchase another 4 coffees, or not, even that box of coffee, and go and just drop it around the corner with a bunch of cups and say, hey, keep warm. You know what I mean? Like, it's not much for us to be able to do it. And I think, what is the journey been for these people? So, I'm a registered naloxone distributor through XhAle. I have a lawn sign that says naloxone on site, which is one of our each and everythings that we do. Because the other thing that we need to look at is we're looking at drug use as if it's, and I hate this word, junkies. Once again, we're stigmatizing people, but majority of deaths throughout opioid poisoning are happening with men between the ages of 35 and 50, and 70% of them in their own homes. They're people that look like you, Matt, like, and look like Mark. You know what I mean? Like, they're our husbands, they're our boyfriends, they're our dads, they're our uncles, they're our brothers, that are dying, and that's not even including the 3-to-1 male suicide rate. We are seeing the women die, but we're seeing our boys die more than anything. And the other thing, we're alcohol producers, as people who produce beer, we make a drug. It's just that our drug is regulated. We have infrastructure within our society that is there to cushion the negative effects of what it is that we do. So why aren't we regulating this industry as well and saving lives? Alberta alone is contributing a quarter of the national deaths, almost a quarter of the national deaths. And we've had 3 safe consumption sites close provincially over the last year.
Why?
Political ideology. And that, it's been the argument that small business is against safe consumption. So what we're doing with each and every is we're proving that wrong. Small business is not against safe consumption sites. We're for it. And most of the people within our organization are alcohol producers. We're built on an infrastructure of harm reduction.
Right. When I think about what's happening here with harm reduction, we have a very small c conservative, prohibition era kind of style attitude, but at least in the cities, I feel that's changing. There's talk of setting up more safe consumption sites. We have one in Saskatoon, and we're seeing some progress. And the stats are now coming out where they're talking about we've prevented X amount of infections, we've prevented X amount of overdoses, we've tested people's drugs to make sure they're not tainted and they're not consuming what they didn't want. They maybe purchased something, but it was stepped
toxic
on. Right.
Yeah, it's toxic. We have toxic supply as well right now due to COVID. So that's the other one. We're seeing what we call accidental poisonings and not overdoses, because of toxicity levels.
I do like when you discuss that we are in the business of making a controlled substance, And I do try to talk about how to consume in a responsible way. We do have to unpack this bro-y, fratty party culture of crushing beers on our heads and getting stupid. And I guess in my own way has always been to say, here's what really great meal to pair this beer with. Here's the foods you should focus on. And instead of saying you want to crush like 12 of these in one sitting, it's like have 2 really, really great, exceptional beers that focus on quality and flavor to get to satisfaction, rather than I'm gonna have the most beers consumed ever, and that's the virtue. Like, that's not the virtue anymore.
Yeah, I think one of the things, when you brought up, the bro fratty thing, is our drug consumption is glorified. And you know why? The bro fratty, they're not underprivileged minority individuals. Like because of who we are, from born given privilege, our drug use is glorified. We see drug use glorified through cocaine. It's the rich and famous, but it's not, you know what I mean? Like, it's not stigmatized that we have to move these people out of town and we have to close down their, accessibility to it. And it's the same thing with alcohol. Our consumption is glorified. It doesn't fucking make sense to me.
Are you saying let me rephrase this. Are you saying the wealthy drug consumption, like the wealthy ownership class or white collar, their consumption, although harmful, is celebrated, whereas the cheaper, more available products to people who are not wealthy ownership is stigmatized?
Correct.
Okay. Sorry, I've never thought of that.
That's right. Before. It's part of the stigmatization. And it's part of unpacking that, as I'm the same kind of drug user as any other intravenous or inhalation drug user. I'm the same kind of drug user. I drink. I have edibles. I don't inhale anymore, but I do have lived experience. I've never done intravenous, but I definitely have, friends. I lost a very dear friend in 2013 to accidental overdose, accidental poisoning. And it's there's stigmatization, and I don't think people often realize or understand their bias and where it stems from.
I don't know if you listened to the episode I had with Jason Mercurdy. He is working with the Saskatchewan Harm Reduction group in Saskatchewan, and he was very frank about the number of people dying and overdosing in Saskatchewan. He was very, very outspoken. So it's interesting to see those parallels that you draw, not even without being prompted. Your perspective and his seem very, very on the same level.
Yeah. To say that I'm not passionate about it is probably an understatement. It's why, Ewan Thompson, who's owns and runs Rough Labs down here, he's actually the fearless leader of Each and Every. And, he approached me last year and I said, yeah, whatever it takes. But these are the real conversations that we need to have amongst our privileged classes, because the problem is connected to every single one of us. I think we often disconnect ourselves from the problem because we don't see ourselves connected to junkies or street people or the unhoused, but we are actually connected to them. That could be any one of us. But we just have had, as I said, the infrastructure within our lives that has prevented us from being there.
You yourself, as a renegade, I understand you're doing things a little unconventionally and what we might describe as contract brewing.
Mm-hmm.
But that requires like friendships and patience and relationships, because that's like asking someone to let you on their computer and dig through their files, and they're like, ooh, like, I don't know if I want you going into the hidden folder, but when you're riding on somebody else's brewery, that's a big ask, and yet you're making a go of it. You're making it work. Can you tell me how that goes?
Yeah, I've been called, I'm not a real brewer by a lot of people. I've also had industry colleagues tell me, that I don't deserve my place in industry, and we definitely have systematic gatekeeping. But I'm really fortunate to have the relationships that I have with the breweries that I have. I'm not new to the industry, even though XhAle might be new. I've worked in the industry professionally for the last 6 years in Alberta, and been involved in craft beer for the last 11 or 12 years. So definitely we learn, like when we're in the brew house together, we definitely learn from each other. And I think that's one of the things I love about doing this is I get to work with an abundance of different people and different minds in making my little dream and recipe come to life. And they are also learning things from me, because I think about things a little differently, taking a Kolsch and not doing early edition hopping, but doing late edition hopping based on alpha acid and based on different kinds of things that I want to get out of it. Switching yeast strains up and looking at different viability options around that, and using different, like I used wort staining as a technique from my porter, which their brewers had never done before. And we're learning from each other, so that's definitely very cool. I mean, I started the contract side out of necessity. I lost my job due to COVID in 2020. The idea was to stay in my my corporate, I call it my corporate-ish sales and marketing role, that was cushy, and well, it wasn't cushy, but it was definitely well paid, for 4 years, and be able to leave and then not have to pay myself and go directly into my destination, which is eventually what I'm aiming to do, is be a destination brewery. But unfortunately a pandemic hit, and where I finally got my big break in my career at 38, and that all came crashing down because of a pandemic. And then I was back where I started 10 years ago almost. So I started this out of kind of necessity, and it's a slog, can I tell you? And I'm gatekept out of a lot of different ways, but making it happen and utilizing a system where I can utilize it, and breaking glass ceilings where I need to, and cutting red tape along the way, and being thorns in people's sides.
Mark said he was talking to you at Outcast, and you made such an impression on him when he got to speak with you. And then a day or two later, he saw you like hefting sacks of barley over at Toolshed, and you were in the middle of a brew, and he's like excited to talk to you, but you're like, just a sec, I'm brewing right now, I'm busy. And you were like slugging it like a one-person show or something like that. He's like, she's a real deal. I don't care what anyone says. She's actually brewing, and anyone who says different is full of shit, that kind of thing. So I was like, okay, great. Let's bring her on the pod,
Look, I wouldn't call myself a commercial brewer. I know how to brew, and I know how to get things in the places that they need to be. And there's definitely people who do it a lot better than me. And when I have my own brewery, I'm definitely going to bring somebody in that does it a lot better than me, because my skills and time need to be out there. But I'm definitely slugging sacks of grain, and putting things in place, and doing manual recipe scale development and design. And I'm getting in the trenches for sure. I'm also a control freak, so that is probably also something that I'm not handing my recipes over to somebody and trusting them with it. I think that's what it comes down to. I don't trust anyone.
We have had a similar issue where we couldn't keep up with some beers, and we ran out because we just couldn't brew fast enough. And we had another brewery come to us and say, well, we'll contract brew for you. We've got tank space. And Mark and the rest of us were kind of like, oh, that's like letting you take our baby out without a seatbelt on. We're not sure.
You got to be there. I think that's one of the things, I'm there through the process of it. And there's different process between the two breweries. So I contract brew out of Field and Forge, which is where See You Next Tuesday is. And their brewery is beautiful. I've known them before they even opened. And then I brew out a tool shed, which is for my smaller batch. When I talk about smaller batch, that's anything from 25 to 30 hec stuff. So it's my one-off stuff. A little less hands-on at just because of the process that they have involved. But, you know, Vince Buki over there has been a friend for years and super kind of hands-on in the process of making sure everything is there and we're all on board and tracking numbers and taste testing and QA and all that sort of stuff. So there's definitely a stringent process. I'm definitely a lot more hands-on just because of the process and ability at Toolshed. And, you know, when decisions need to be made, the decisions need to be made during the brewing process. You know, when you get different numbers back, those decisions should be mine. Those decisions shouldn't be left to anybody else. That's my decision to make, right?
100% agree.
Yeah.
You're kind of flying by the seat of your pants a little bit, and if you're developing a recipe, you need to be present.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of, it feels like, not written down knowledge. Brewers tend to have, it feels like an oral history. There's this one time I was dealing with Dave, and I was shooting photos, and he grabs this bag of lactose, and he sliced the bag in this very odd, specific way where it was on kind of at 75% from the top on two angles. So he created this like sieve with the bag, and he half tilted it about just a trickle of this lactose sugar into the boil.
Yep.
And very slowly over time, I'm like, well, what's going on? Why don't you just dump it in? You got shit to do. And he goes, because if I don't cut the bag this way and spread it out over this way specifically, it'll all fall to the bottom and burn.
And then doesn't. Yeah.
Char. And he's like, and then your beer tastes like burnt garbage. I'm like, well, how do you even know that? Who wrote that down? And he goes, I learned it at Olds College from one of the brewers. It wasn't part of the actual course. We were just doing a lactose-infused beer. And I'm like, that's such a minutia piece. And if no one told you directly, how would you know until you fucked up a beer?
Yep. Yeah. Yeah. Learning, it's part of the I think that's one of the things that, you know, while it's so, you know, frustrating that I don't have my own brew house just yet, definitely learning from other people and brewing through and with other people, you know, and all the recipes that get developed are actually done on 5 to 15 gallon batches prior to, and there's a couple of stabs. And I, you know, do that with one of my best bud, Paul Heslop. He was actually homebrewer 2020. And we do all the recipe development. We have very complementary skills. He's very much on the BJCP traditionalist kind of style where I like to blow shit up, and he looks at me weird when I come to him with an idea, and I'm like, let's just trust me, let's roll with this. And so we kind of smash our skill sets together, and this is how we come up with what we're doing. And then I actually manually upscale everything by hand. And I have very complicated spreadsheets and whatever else. And I'm able to adjust anything at any given time, depending on different DE, depending on different moisture or grain, depending on different alpha, depending on different water chem. And that's the things that I think, you know, and when you talk about minutia, like that's the minutia. Yeah.
And there's so many pieces to recall.
Yeah. Yeah. And you're learning from that. Yeah. You're learning from different people all the time, you know, and I wouldn't know how to do that, you know, if I didn't spend, you know, Doug Checknita, who's the head brewer up at the Monolith, he's got an amazing mind, and he's like a little brother to me, and he's spent hours with me going over those different sorts of things. And, you know, I've traveled kind of all around the world for beer and met so many different people and taken bits and pieces and learning, you know, all those kinds of things to put it into what I'm doing today. And, you know, when you talk, I kind of think about, if you tip the lactose in, it falls to the bottom and it burns the shit out of everything. Those are things that you learn, like listen to other people. I love hearing about other people's mistakes. That's right. And I'm happy to share that with anybody else. I'm like, oh, ask me how I know about that one. Yeah, don't take that tri-clamp off. Ask me how I know about that one.
And we haven't even gotten into talking about how do you make a label that meets the regulatory requirements? How do you manage staff and payroll and get your ads out on the radio or TV or Facebook or any of those like extra pieces? Like when you're a small one-woman show or maybe a small band of 4 to 5 people, it's a whole big thing. So from my perspective, props to you for nailing it. Where can people find your beers in Alberta and Saskatchewan?
Saskatchewan. Actually, I just had my sales things up for Saskatchewan.
I think I saw Sobeys posting about XhAle beer.
Yeah, so ingredients in Saskatoon, Urban Cellars, Golden Mile, Sobeys Liquor Preston, Sobeys Liquor Victoria Square so far, but it's kind of growing. I've got all my products listed out there now, and it is available through special PO order, and then kind of everywhere and anywhere with in Alberta. So all the way down south Lethbridge, Medicine Hat up to Grand Prairie. The biggest ones are Calgary Co-op, but I mean most of the independents and growing. So yeah.
I had to go, and when I was doing research for this show, I'd reached out to a few friends from Alberta. Not just beer friends, but just friends who are there. And I'm like, have you tried it yet? What do you think? And almost universally, like no one had anything negative to say. They're like, either I've heard of it, I heard it's good, or they've tried it and they're like, oh man, it's really good. You can't wait till you get some. So I thought that was a swinging endorsement. And then Mark comes out, and if something is not up to snuff, Mark will say so. And he goes, this is great. Have it, drink it, get it in you, like that. And to me, that's like the number one endorsement.
Thank you. Yeah. That really means, I'm blushing. That really means a lot. Mark and I think, have very similar pedagogies and or ideologies around our beer, and around the quality that we expect out of ourselves. I'm pretty hard on myself when it comes to that. I one of the things I love is saisons, and actually this year Alberta we got an Alberta Beverage Award for They Weren't Raging Against White Goods, which was the dry hop Belgian saison with Bar Rouge. That really means a lot to get that endorsement, and hopefully we can get a few more endorsements out in Saskatchewan. So yeah. I do want to come out and visit. I've actually never ever been out to Saskatchewan in the 13 years that I've been here. But I'm looking at doing some beer festivals and coming out. And I've also spoken to Mark about doing the calendar for next year. So I think we'll come out with Ryan and I'll take a trip out and do a brewery tour and get some snaps for the calendar for 2023.
Are you talking like another In the Buff calendar?
Hell yeah.
I don't think that'll be hard to talk Mark into.
No, I know. He's like, oh yeah, I'm all in.
I mean, no offense, I won't. And it's not because I'm a square, but I actually want your calendar to succeed, and myself would make it fail.
No. The more diverse bodies, I think that's one of the things, the more diverse bodies, the better. You know what I mean? Like it's part of that acceptance and self-love and being like, this is who I am. This is me. And that's what I want. The reason why we have, I call my company XhAle, not only is my nickname Xtina, but that X marks a spot, and that's the spot that you're taking up space. And that's because you can breathe easier, because you can live in authenticity, right? Just be who you are. Like,
can I tell you my favorite nudist colony story?
Please.
So I was a very young cub reporter, maybe 24, 25, and I was just on an internship with the local paper. And one of the reporters says to me, do you want to go out to the nudist colony to do a story? And I said, not really. That kind of not my jam. And he goes, you should go. And I'm like, can I think about it? He goes, yeah, you can think about it. And then throughout the rest of the day, the other reporters are like, you got to go. You got to go to the nudist colony. You got to tell us what it's about. And I'm like, well, why don't you take the story and go if you're so excited? And they're like, no, you have to go. This is like some kind of hazing for the new guy. So I'm like, fine, I'll go. And I think it kind of hurt my rep or my cred a little bit because I was not excited to take on this story. We get out there, and it's a whole thing surrounded by trees on all sides, very enclosed. And everybody's just walking around all naked, and they're just living their best life. They got a little towel. And I'm interviewing the guy, and we're doing this whole interview just kind of like this podcast. And at the end, He goes, oh, I'd love to give you a business card. And he pats his butt. And he goes, but I don't have any pockets.
That's brilliant. That's amazing. Amazing.
I'm like, that's the first quote that's going in the story. And people were howling in the newsroom. They were reading the story once it got published. They're like, that's great. And I'm like, yeah, it was a really interesting experience. So
that's amazing. Well, we'll have to, I'll have to get the mailing address of the brewery, and I'll send you out a calendar.
Oh,
we'll give you a couple of months to think about it and say yes.
Oh, as a person to be in the photos.
Uh-huh.
I think my wife might kill me. She'd be like, wait a second, you're doing boudoir shots for a beer calendar? She's like, this has gone too far.
It's actually called doudoir when it's guys.
Oh, doudoir.
Yeah.
I like that one. I did see the photo of Chef Matt Phillips in the pink underwear. I was like, he went all out for that. I am not that brave.
You know what? That was such an emotionally charged photo shoot. And the scenes that you don't see is us hugging and crying. He's one of my best friends. But us hugging and crying after it, Matt's gone through a lot over the last couple of years and really come out to be who he is and living in his total authenticity. And he said that day changed his life.
Really?
Because it's like that was the first time that he felt like that he could be who he was in public. Really?
Because in the time, in the space I've known him, he's just out there living his best life.
Yeah, he's gone through a lot. He's hid who he was for a really long time. And we had a lot of tears and hugs after that photo shoot. And he's gone on to do other shoots since, and just kind of really, it's allowed him to really live into himself. And that's the experience that we want to give people.
Does he carry XhAle Brewing at his restaurant?
He definitely does.
I heard the chicken is amazing. Like, it's on my list next time I go.
It's so fucking good. So fucking good. Like, I crave it. It's the first thing I stop at when I go up there.
Okay, with Christina's endorsement, I 100% am going to get this chicken and pair it with See You Next Tuesday.
Totally.
Well, Christina, I want to thank you for your time today.
Thanks so much for having me on. I really appreciate it, and very grateful and honored, and with a craft beer soaked heart, sending a lot of love because I'm feeling the love from Saskatchewan and from Rebellion. So thank you.
I'm super excited. I'm ripping out to Sobeys after this because when I saw the beer was gone from the fridge, I'm like, well, now I'm just going to have to get some more, and I'm not sharing it with anyone.
I think they also have my plum pudding porter that came in as well.
Oh, you're speaking to my heart. I'm a dark beer guy.
Right? Yeah, this plum pudding porter is pretty rad.
It's on my list.
Beauty. Thank you so much, Matt. I really appreciate it.
Rebels, thanks for listening today. If you have any questions or comments about this episode, be sure to join us on our brand new Facebook group page, the Rebellion Brewing Podcast. I'm going to include links to all things XhAle Brewing so you can find them online and on social media. I'm also proud to let you know that we're members of the Saskatchewan Podcast Network. It's a one-stop shop for tons of locally produced shows from across our province. And you can find them at saskpodcastnetwork.com. Be sure to follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Untappd so you don't miss out on the latest in SaaS craft beer news. Thank you for joining the Rebellion.